Hey guys, what's up? Just wanted to do a little video here. As you know, uh, we're into researching Bigfoot based on our experiences, encounters, etc. So I've been doing some research with Google Earth, through the winter here. What I've done is I've removed a lot of the roads and cities and tags, and I just like to try to keep areas a little discreet as best as possible. And what I wanted to show you is some of the areas that we had noticed they were making, I wouldn't say migratory movements, but throughout the year they were moving location to location to location, staying in this general, 4,000, 5,000 acres until they had to, move off for other purposes, hunting, logging, whatever it may be. But before I get into talking about that, there's one thing I really wanted to show you. So up here, way up above, you have your toolbar. You guys probably can't see it, but if you hit the sun, what happens is it gives you a relative time frame here. Basically, you can slide this bar back and forth. Sorry about that. And what it does is it will show the way the sun rises or sets on any given area. So I'm just taking this back. You can see the changes in the screen. And obviously you could go farther, whatever you need to do. So right now it's the 28th, or 30th, sorry about that. And it takes you all the way to what time it is. It's 7 p.m. right now. If I back this up, what I wanted to show you is it creates some shadowing. You see that shadowing right in here? What this does is a few things. We know that a lot of times they move in the dark a lot easier. A lot of people say they're fully nocturnal. I don't fully believe that at all. We've had numerous daytime encounters, but a lot of people, I'm going to tell you 9 out of 10 people have sightings or notice them along ridges in certain areas. Now, you can see ridges in the daytime like this, but it doesn't really give you a good contrast. A lot of times you get out in the woods and you'll take a walk, and then you'll get to a ridge and you're like, oh my god, it's it's gigantic, or look how deep this valley is, and no wonder why they can evade people. But as that shadowing, it really does help define how deep some of these ridges are and where they run. So I suggest, if you didn't know about it, you could try it. I mean, we're just specifically using it for the way Bigfoot move and certain areas they go to, if it's migration or not, or so on. But this really helps contrast areas that you could see where they would hang out, let's say, move through. They try to stay hidden as best as possible. So I won't fully shut this off. I'll just leave it here for right now. But what I kind of wanted to talk about in general is there was a few locations in this area that we noticed certain times during the year they would, let's call it, hold up. They would stay in certain areas for, let's say, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. I don't know if it was based on the food, or if there was a shortage of food, so they would have to move, or it's just their strategy on how they move around. But we noticed that they would stay in certain areas for a given amount of time, and then they would move off, and we'd find them again. And this took a really long time, almost 2 years, to really figure out where they were moving, what they were doing. And I'm still trying to figure out why. That's kind of the big question. Anybody can just spark interest and say, well, it's because of the food or the way the animals, but I'm really trying to delve into why they're moving, because I think the more we learn about them, the better off, the better understanding we're going to have. to track them down or find them or whatever it may be. But we noticed they were hanging out here and crossing almost every year in February. And I don't know if it was a migrational thing that they were doing, but what I started to pinpoint is when they came across this certain area, this is actually like a trail, but it's a dead end. They wouldn't come straight down and cross this road in this vicinity here. Two things were happening. They would come down as close as possible, skirt the backyards of these people that live down here or come here, and they would hit these strips of woods. They would rather not cross these large fields. They were coming down, filtering around, you know, and these are what we call pinch points. These areas we use for hunting. When you're hunting deer, you look for, you know, certain things, saddles, ridges, pinch points, certain areas where it's going to funnel those animals, deer, Bigfoot, whatever it is, through. And this is how we obtained some of the really good game camera footage, was by putting cameras in certain areas. As you can see, there's a lot of wooded area up through here. It ultimately leads down through, you know, Pennsylvania. Let me go back really quick here for you. And like I said, so when you're trying to track these things or look around, what we suggest is once you find an area that there was either reports, you've had a sighting, or you know they're there, what we would do is drive these roads, dirt roads, whatever it may be, and we would park and we'd get out and take a look, and we'd walk the sides of the roads. And a lot of times you might catch a track, you might catch something, a tree break, a structure, something that would give you definitive proof that they were crossing a certain area. So that's, you know, basically what we did over here. I learned that they weren't coming across these fields at all. They would just stick to these little tiny areas or come across here and get back in there and hit the creek bottoms, so they could get to another area. So look for that. Look for these little strips that connect, you know, woods to woods. That's the way I like to say it. Right here is a really good area. Even though there's a house or houses, I mean, these things at night, there's been, you know, things reported here. We spoke with a gentleman last year. Garbage cans were like tipped over. Garbage bag was taken back across the street. The bird feeder was taken. You know, he didn't know what did it, but we don't know, but we're pretty sure that they may have had something to do with it, just based on our experiences in this given area here. So February was a big time for them down through this section. And then what happened is, as summer progressed, we would catch audio in here, but we would catch no glimpses of them or anything, and very minimal structure. So it was just, maybe they were just passing through. But then, let's say May, June, and July, this ridge that runs here with these other ridges, they would frequent this. They would come up out of here, and this is like a bluff down to this road. It's kind of steep. There is like a hiking trail that's nearby, but they would sit along here. And this is, you know, years back, this is where we did some of our habituation. We got really good results. We ended up getting some photos, and ultimately we pissed them off, and they moved away. We kind of took the habituation thing away, and it caused a little bit of a rift between us, you could say. And they didn't show up for a good 3 or 4 months later. What we did is we were placing audio recorders. We have an area up here that we call the green room, and we were getting all kinds of things. There is a trail here that was put in years and years ago. Sometimes hunters walk it, but it's really thick along here on the backside, and it's like they were sitting here watching these trails that intersect. If somebody would walk it or hike it, they were sitting up in here, you know, in the trees or wherever it may be, kind of just hanging out. It was like this, you'd call it an arrowhead, or, you know, maybe a triangle. It seemed like they hung out in this area pretty good. I I think it, it was just it's a security type thing. They have the advantage. They can see, if people are coming up this trail here or what the situation is. We've had quite a few, things happen over here. This is exactly, actually, let me zoom in for you. Right about here, there's a little bit of water that comes up through here. Right about here is where we had an audio recorder. Like I said, we call this the green room, and we actually captured some pretty good vocals out of that area. We sent it off to a few people to get looked at, and basically, if you don't know too much about language and sound and stuff like that, what they look for is morphemes and phenoms. And if you have that in a sequence in an audio clip, it's indicative of language. Well, what we captured was some type of language. It seemed like there was some screaming or arguing going on, and then at the end, so it would sound like an older male, or aka person like me and you. If we were yelling at youngsters, you could hear them lash out and say something. There was definitely morphemes or phenoms in the language there, and it's still up in the air about what's being said. A lot of different people have a bunch of different opinions, but we have that shared on our SoundCloud, and I'll definitely try to provide the link in the video of what we recorded. We were using our H4n Zoom recorder, which is a great recorder if you need a recorder for the woods. Its clarity and depth is one of the best. I'll try to provide a link for that. You can get hundreds of yards. You'd be amazed about how much you can hear from so far away with the H4n. So kind of back to what I was saying anyway. We noticed they would move through certain areas. We also have a video of where we've tracked them. I will share that in the link also. Bigfoot Found on Google Earth, I think was the name of the title. But it was a huge range area that they would circle through. And so like I said, this was kind of the February area. Then it went off through summer. Then they kind of hung out here maybe for like a week. Maybe a week or two, it seemed. They crossed over. There were some structures found in here. Then they went down into this valley that's over here. And this seemed to be like the end of the year type thing, maybe August, September, and then once October came, bow season, they kind of disappeared. I also wanted to briefly point out there's an area where they had logged just this year into some of their core area, because they're putting in some windmills that stretch across the county, about 90 of them. And I was just recently privileged to talk with one of my researchers who has a buddy that works for the company, and down through this area, I can't give out the roads, there had been a few sightings by the workers, and they didn't really know what the situation was, and they were finding huge tracks around some of the equipment, bulldozers, etc. So in the future, hopefully I can get some of the information, some of the pictures, maybe an interview from one of the gentlemen that actually had some encounters in this main corridor. But I just wanted to share that with you. And we hunt on property down this direction, way over in here. I'm not going to pinpoint where, just for certain purposes, but we noticed that we were catching things on camera and coming down through this area, and if you look, what was happening is, see, there's fields down through here. It seemed like they were coming off this direction, and they would always cross where the woods was closer to the woods where they could stay in cover. So those are sections you really need to check out, or the fingers. They weren't really exposing themselves in the field regions, but if you take a look, I'll just give you a sky view here. They would head off through these areas down through PA. This is obviously the corner of New York. And this is, you know, the Appalachian Mountains. It gets crazy, and you know there's tons of sightings down here in the mountains. But we've had reports from all over, you know, from PA here, from Chautauqua County, Cattaraugus County, out through Buffalo, Rochester, Franklinville, Gowanda, Salamanca, Panama, Cassadaga, Stockton, Arkwright, Cherry Creek. So this isn't an isolated event. Erie is down here, and if you remember back in the 70s, there was the huge outbreak of UFO sightings, and what came right along with that was the Bigfoot sightings. So not only is it steeped in lore, but these things are in fact real. And when you start paying attention, you know, to their travel patterns, where they can and can't go, it starts to make sense. If you take a look here, there's a body of water. 9 out of 10 times they're not crossing that. You know, people live along here, so on and so forth. So they really have in this area here 2 options. They have to go tight through here down by the lake area, which is more populated, or they have to swing out. You know, this is the Conowongo River, Allegheny, and there's a lot of sightings that come out of Allegheny. Well, that makes sense. They're not going to usually swing toward residential. I mean, you will catch them as they move in the residential areas. You know, that's where you see they just built a subdivision and somebody's in their kitchen and they catch a glimpse out the window, something walks by. Well, that's what that is. That's, you know, as they're moving through these tight-knit areas. But 90% of the time they tend to go the other direction, and that's why they filter out through the Allegheny into Pennsylvania area. So as we take a look, like I said, they would move in these circle patterns, and then they would ultimately move their way back to this ravine. And if I use the shadowing, let's see how it gets darker. It's 2:20 p.m. here listed. You know, the way they have it, I don't know if it would be correct. I don't know if the dates are correct, but if we're just going by time, it's already getting dark in these valleys, which they like. That's why they hold up. You know, you could see the definite shadowing by 3 p.m. They're already, you know, the way the sun sets, and these valleys, that's why they start to come up out of them. And if you look, see how the shadowing stays dark in these certain areas, and that's usually where they tend to come up and sit and you know, move around or watch people or do things. So that's why I suggest using the shadowing, at least so you can get an idea of certain things. Not a lot of people usually use that, but it's just a little tool that we use while we're in this, you know, in this quest. So really what I want to do is I want to challenge you to get out, take a look for yourself. A lot of people don't believe that this species, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't exist. Well, I've been hunting like 24 years of my life, and never before did I look for Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever name you want to give it. I never seen tracks, I never seen structures, I never paid attention to any of these things. I've seen the structures, like, you know, you'd be hunting and see a bunch of trees and not really put 2 and 2 together. It wasn't until 2013 when I had my sightings. My first sighting was right down here, metal detecting with a juvenile, what I know as a juvenile now. It was like 30 feet from me, watching me. As I seen it, it was kind of on a hill, looked at me, I looked at it, it bared its bottom teeth to me. I was able to see the block teeth that it had. They were very big. I didn't see any fangs or anything, any canids. Then it proceeded to go down on all fours and run that direction. I never really told anybody about that back then, because people think you're crazy. It wasn't until over here we had a sighting just as spring was breaking, and you know, we were up here doing some things, and one crossed right, let me get the exact area here. We were standing approximately here, and it crossed right here near these pines. It was actually crouched in this position right here, like a football player watching. And I was coming out of here, and my other buddy was coming out of here. He got to the trail before I did. And if you want to take a look at this, go ahead and watch the DVD I've Seen Bigfoot, because it has a really good rendition of what happened. And so he tells me to look. So I look up the trail here, you know, like 200-300 yards, and squatting in the trail is this big thing. As we come shoulder to shoulder, we're standing about right here, wide open. You can see what the situation was. It stood up right here. Now it stands up, and it's massive. What ended up happening is, as it walked off, it hit its head on one of the branches, and the branch shook, like brushed it or whatever. So when we went back later on to analyze that, to try to get tracks and stuff like that, it was 9'8" off the ground, that branch. So that's a pretty tall individual. But ultimately, that's what got me into doing this research after those two sightings. And I've learned a lot from them, watching them, spending time in the woods, seeing them, following their trackways, doing certain things. So I challenge you to do the same thing, to get out in your area, you know, follow the roads, follow where there's, you know, sightings, see if you can find their crossings. There's certain areas, these fingers, the pinch points, you know, and backtrack up a little bit and see what you find. Take a look, you know, maybe I can turn a few skeptics into some believers this summer. If anybody's looking to, you know, get out, more than welcome to come, and maybe I can show you some things. Maybe we'll have an encounter. It's not precise science per se, but you never know. But just to get out and show you guys. But that's it for now. Just a few things I wanted to talk about. Have a happy new year. Thanks, and God bless.